Good evening. After a full day, you guys still seem like you're full of energy. And if you decide to join us, we hope that you keep the same level of enthusiasm and momentum until you graduate. So let's get into this. I want to start by making a statement. What do you think? And this is not meant to be a political statement. I will purposefully stay away from making such statements. If I do accidentally end up doing so, that wasn't my intention. So, what do I mean here with this statement? We live in exciting times. Well, here's a qualifier in small fonts. After all, if we look at the history of humankind, no generations before us have had access to so much creature comfort, ability to transport ourselves anywhere in the world quickly and safely and comfortably. Technology, connectivity, ability to do things, ability to bend the reality at will, so to speak, has been unprecedented. And that's what I mean by living in exciting times. But challenges abound. Why is that? We say that we have access to more technology, more know how, more resources, more ability to do anything we want. And even then, we seem to be facing a barrage of issues, old and new, that keep coming at us with increasing frequency and intensity. Well, here is the first one that I'm sure you might think of. On the left, I have sort of the examples of natural disasters that aren't uncommon, but the problem is they're coming with increasing intensity and frequency our way. And I'm sure you can identify with some of those pictures on the right, um, especially the last one down below refers to Houston. I guess this one isn't going to do the work of pointing, but that one is just before the hurricane did the landfall, and the one below that is right after, where you can literally not even see that there was an interstate there after that. Here is another one that is relatively recent, the one from last year in Canada, where somebody said that I don't know if there is hell, but if there is one, it probably looks like this. Right? Such an intense inferno that raged for many, many days. In fact, here is a slide showing that it's not a mere assertion. On a factual basis, since 1980, if you were to chart the number of catastrophic events, yes, there is variation, but we are seen to be on a very clear upward trend. Not only that, we are, through our own actions, are leading the rate at which the species are becoming extinct on this planet at 10,000 times the natural rate. Naturally, between 2 to 5 species can go extinct every year. And we have accelerated that to 10,000 times that rate. At this rate, in next 30 years, we are looking to lose about half of all of the species on the planet. Looks like we are pretty good at getting rid of others. Well, not only that, we are equally good at harming ourselves. Conflict, violent conflict, and forced migrations of people is becoming more and more prevalent in more and more parts of the world. Now, sitting here in the US, we might feel we are probably not that close to the center of action, and therefore maybe it's not something we should worry as much about. Here is a graph that shows the countries in the world that are either causing those migrations or those who are at the receiving end of those desperate human beings who are fleeing their homelands in the hope of survival by finding another place where they can hopefully have a life, let alone have a better life. So the only part that I don't see on this map is Antarctica. So unless we are there, pretty much everywhere else in the world, it's something that should be a cause for concern. When we are not killing each other, we are also at work to increase our population. While we need to fill up the space, right? I mean, we are getting rid of all the other species, so we need to take care of the space we are making. And over time, we went from just having few millions of us in the semi-nomadic era to about 7 billion now. And the projections are on the pessimist side, on the conservative side, about 9.7 to 11 billion by the year 2050. And then by 2100, we are looking to cross between 12 to 15 billion people, depending upon who you ask. So we are taxing the earth quite a bit in terms of our actions and proliferating ourselves on this planet. These are, some of the things that might worry the whole world. Let's go to the country level specifics. Here is a chart that shows at the top the size of each country of the world as a proportion to the world's population that resides in each country. And then the bottom part shows each country as a percentage of the world's total energy consumption that is driven by each country. Notice anything? All of the developed countries, as you can expect, given the higher standards of living, given the access to resources, are consuming a lot more energy than the developing parts of the world, especially the one that's thriving. Japan is probably the only exception in Asia where they punch way above their weight in terms of resource consumption. And maybe that's one way to think about it, saying, gee, I'm glad that these guys aren't consuming as much resources, as much energy as the other parts of the world. But guess what? Those countries are working very diligently at improving the standard of living for their citizens and giving them access to more resources. And guess what's going to happen when they achieve that? Or as they continue to advance, their energy footprint is going to expand. India and China collectively have about 2.5 billion people. And what happens if they start consuming energy at the rate that the developed world currently consumes? The earth is not going to be enough, not just for 7 billion people, let alone the increase, but even for 2 billion people at the rate of energy consumption of the Western world. So something that should make us a little bit concerned. If we think about the disparity at individual level, about less than 1% of the world's population, 0.7%, controls about half of the world's total wealth. Now, we live in a time where access to wealth translates directly into access to resources, all the way from food to amenities to being able to get medical care, to being able to protect yourself against the elements. All of those are tied to access to resources, and that's tied to the wealth. Now, that 0.7% is also the part of the population that is going to be relatively protected from the fallout of advances in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and automation that we seem to be developing at a rapid pace. The people who are going to lose their ability to make a living are the ones that don't have much to begin with. People who rely on the skills which are not that transferable, and they don't have the portability like you and me do, of going and finding other opportunities to make use of our skills. And they are the ones who will probably not be able to have even what they currently have. 3% of the world's wealth, which currently is enjoyed by almost 2/3 of the population. So that again points a pretty big picture. Let's go a little further. Here is something that people say when people complain about the problems. Like when you talk about global warming, somebody speaking in winter will say, where is global warming? I'm freezing here. We want some global warming. Really? The people that say, come on, I don't really see that many poor people. It's like, yeah, you have put them so much far below you, you can't even see them. So That is one of the manifestations of the increasing divide between the haves and the have-nots. And what's happening with the advances in technology? Are we making them come closer? No. We are actually working towards making the divide even bigger. Here is a picture of the world shown in terms of parts of the world where we have acute crises in terms of hunger. Now, currently it's most of Africa, some parts of Asia, very small parts in the Americas. But as we continue to expand the population of the world, this is not going to be contained just in Africa. And by the way, this is denoted as phase 3 and above, which means it's already in the crisis mode, or it can also go into catastrophic mode if it's not managed well. Well, looking at this and many other challenges, the United Nations worked on creating a global consensus towards driving world action by coming up with 8 Sustainable Development Goals, or what they call the Millennial Development Goals, in the year 2000. And then we worked on it for about 15 years. And then UN met again, tried to create a wider consensus, took a stock of where we were, and guess what? From the 8 Millennial Development Goals, the UN said, gee, not only we need to work on this, we need to expand the definition of challenges. And now we have 17 global goals for sustainable development, which tries to unite the world towards making the world becoming a more livable and more sustainable place for all of us. In fact, now there are efforts underway that allow us to not only monitor, but also track the progress that we are making towards achieving those goals. Here is one picture that says that these 17 goals in a way try to tackle economic sustainability, societal sustainability, and environmental sustainability. And if we were to look at where we are as a world, a gap frame that shows where we are, there are 24 indicators along 4 dimensions. And for each of those, we can see whether we are not as bad to being sort of in an existential crisis mode, to places where there is nothing much to worry. So anything that's on the outer edge, good. Anything towards the center, cause of grave concern. So collectively as a world, waste treatment, for example, is one of those things where as a species, as humanity, as society, we don't have a clue of how to do it properly. And as a world, we keep on piling the garbage. We keep on shifting it from one place to the next. We find a better place to dump it. We find a better place to hide it. But ultimately, it's going to catch up with us unless we do something soon. The other thing that as a world, we really need to work on is social integration. The divide that I mentioned of the haves and the have-nots is growing. Well, how do we do as a country? The United States. We are one of the most developed countries, or among the most developed countries in the world. We have access to technology, know-how, resources, to the extent that the rest of the world is jealous of us sometimes, saying, gee, we wish we had the kind of access that you guys have. How are we doing? Here is the picture for the US. I want to show 2 paradoxical things out of this chart. If you notice the one about clean air, that's number 5 on the northeast of their chart, it shows that we are okay. As far as clean air is concerned, US doesn't have that much to worry. But if you go to number 3 and number 2 especially, when you look at the carbon quotient, unlike the rest of the world, we actually have a crisis on our hand. How exactly is it possible that we enjoy clean air? And let me go back to the previous. Collectively, the world isn't enjoying as much of clean air as we do, but at the same time, the carbon quotient for the US is among the worst. How can we resolve this paradox? Is it something that we can take credit for? Are we doing something good in the US that's making that happen? Any guesses? What do you think? We seem to have among the cleanest air in the world, while we keep dumping the highest level of carbon in the atmosphere. How does that add up? Two things that contribute to it: population density and geographic area. So compared to most of the Asian countries and African countries, so far we enjoy a much lower population density and much wider expanse in terms of geographic area. So on per capita basis, we are among the worst polluters in the world, but given that we don't have that many of us in a wide land, we are fortunate to have clean air, but that is not going to stay with us forever. So collectively, as a society, we do need to work on this. Now, you might be saying, hold on, I'm not here to fix the world, right? Let's start with a rather humble goal of doing something that in fact allows me to make a difference and be successful where I am. Maybe the global problems are too big for me to worry about. Let's start more local. Any country relies on three sectors for the society to function. Start with public sector, which we might call policymakers, government and governmental organizations. And then we have the private sector, which I believe most of us might end up becoming part of or might already be part of. And then we have the social sector. As I categorically said, I will stay away from making statements about the governments. Otherwise, I will end up making comments that may not be politically correct. But let me spend a couple of minutes on each of these sectors. Let's start with the social sector. Apparently, these are the people with the heart in the right place, right? They are the ones that are trying to do good. Why do we keep having societal challenges? Why do we still have homeless? Even in the state of California, which is apparently the golden state in the US, among the most liberal parts of the world, we even have homelesses. Actually, we have the second highest homeless population of any city in the United States, among other things. And it's not because we don't have enough NGOs. In the US alone, we have 1.5 million not-for-profits, even though we are among the most developed country in the world. Now, hold on. We have about 320 million people, roughly. And let's assume that half of those have the means to at least work on their own challenges, leaving half of the population that the not-for-profits should at least work with. That gives you one not-for-profit for 100 individuals. Plenty of NGOs. It's not about not having enough NGOs. Okay, so maybe they are constrained by not having enough resources, by not having enough money, not having access, not having the ability to make the difference that they would really want to do. Last year, 1.8 billion people worldwide donated to social causes. That's 1/4 of the population of the world. 25% of us around the world donated to social causes. So why aren't those resources creating the impact that's possible given the know-how, given the technology, given the access, given the connectivity that we seem to enjoy? What's missing? One thing that you might say is social sector has a structural problem. Actually, not just one, quite a few, but let me mention a couple of them. Number one, as a society, we do not like seeing the people working for the social sector getting paid a good salary. The average population expects them to literally work for free, if not work for peanuts, right? And therefore, they have a challenge in attracting the best people to the sector. Not that many people can afford to join the social sector just from the goodness of their heart. Most of us do also need to make a living. And therefore, collectively, they have to compete with other sectors, and they can't compete that well in terms of talent. Once you get the talent, they also cannot invest in building capacity of those people. Benchmarking is relatively rare. They are not subject to market forces, and therefore there is hardly ever focus on efficiencies and effectiveness in the social sector, something that the private sector kind of takes for granted. It's like, if I want to survive, I have to be competitive, right? And in the social sector, that's something you almost never hear. So that's the social sector's challenges. Let's come to the private sector. Most people who might have a good heart might be writing a check, let's say to support a not-for-profit, to support a social cause, and at the same time might be writing checks, or in today's time, making electronic transfers to pay their bills. Which part of their life do you think they're going to cut out if the going gets tough? The check to the not-for-profit will easily be postponed, saying, gee, when I can, I will get back into that. The things that you do to survive are not going to be put on hold. And that's where the for-profit has the biggest advantage. People do not take not-for-profits as a luxury they can only afford only when they have the choice. For-profit allows more people to make a living in the world than any other sector, and therefore it's an integral part of lives of many more people. It has access to more resources, has more levers to make a difference, and is in a position to change things in the right way only if people leading those businesses have their heart in the right place. Is it always the case? Sometimes yes, but not always. Let me introduce you to a small sample of what I call the corporate hall of shame. Organizations who are known to have deliberately, not by accident, but deliberately engaged in practices which were immoral, unethical, and downright illegal. Right? To me, that's the lowest bar, by the way, right? Legality is a lower bar, and then you also can reach the higher level and say whether it's moral or whether it's ethical. And here is the first one. Chose to delay recall of about 11 million cars, knowing full well what the problem was, how to fix it, knew what can be done to fix it, but engaged in a deliberate comparison of cost, saying if we acknowledge it publicly, we will have to bear the cost of fixing all of those that have this defect. Why don't we just keep quiet? And only for those that make the noise, we will quietly go and fix those problems for them. And half of those we might even be able to convince that, hey, that was your misuse, not the fault of our product, and therefore we don't have to pay for fixing it. We'll make them pay for it. Apparently it backfired, and now they have their permanent place in this hall of shame. Ford did something similar with their SUVs rolling over, known problem that they failed to acknowledge. I didn't put GM here. GM with their ignition switches, similar story. Volkswagen, the emission scandal, knowingly creating algorithm that the engine can detect when it's being tested for emissions, has absolutely no excuse other than saying, yes, we deliberately wanted to do it. Right? It doesn't happen by accident. What about this guy? This is my pet peeve because I'm a parent. I have 2 young kids and I buy plenty of toys. Actually, I buy more toys than anything else nowadays. And these guys have been known to sell toys that have gotten chemicals used in the manufacturing process that are downright illegal to be used for toys, because we know of the harmful effects of those chemicals, but Mattel knowingly allowed those toys to be sold. Here are a couple more. Walmart, among the organizations that can take the top spot. Actually, they have good competition now, but they held the top spot for a long time for the organization that single-handedly drove more of the US population to become dependent on public welfare programs like food stamps and other things by the chronic business practices that deliberately created an environment where the people who work for them had to put up with abusive business practices. Just to give you an example, let's say if Walmart wants to hire 100 people that they need. How many are they going to hire? 200. Why? 100 full-time, I'm going to have to pay benefits for all of them. If I get 200 part-time, I don't have to pay benefits on any of them. Wonderful. Today I'm a store manager and I have one of my employees, let's call him John. And John comes in expecting to work for 8 hours, and he's an hourly paid employee, right? If you are salaried, it doesn't matter, but for an hourly, it's the number of hours you clock. Gee, my store is kind of not feeling that full right now. John, why don't you take a half an hour unpaid break? What? Yeah, because the store is it's not that busy. We don't need you right now. Go take a half an hour unpaid break. Gee, my mortgage doesn't go down just because the store is not busy today. My grocery bills don't come down, but half an hour is not long enough for me to go to anywhere else and do anything. So I loiter around in the store or in the parking lot, come back half an hour later to see whether the store has enough customers so I can continue to be back on paid work, right? And then there are a few others, McDonald's and Nestle and Halliburton. I'll have to stay away from that, otherwise it will become a political comment. Wells Fargo, Enron, our own beloved Apple. um, Horrific working conditions for the workers that are racing against time to put the Apple products out, especially around the launch time of any new Apple product. And Apple knows about it, has the position to twist the arm of the supplier like Foxconn to adopt better business practices, but chooses not to because they want to preserve their profit margins. There is no other explanation for that. Uber, I don't want to tell you more. It's more recent. You know about all of that. So what's going on here? We have social sector, we have the public sector, we have the private sector. We all have access to resources, ability, know-how, connections, technology, everything that we need to do a great job. We aren't doing as well as we could. So what can we do to make that happen? Well, this is a humble assertion from some of us. Well, the missing ingredient is this. The right set of people, because at the end of the day, government is nothing but a bunch of people working together. Social sector is again nothing else but a bunch of people working together. Same thing with the for-profit organizations. At the end, it's the individuals who are part of the organization that drive what's being done. So we want to have people that can and want to do good and do well at the same time. People who are truly educated. Now, hold on. Let me go back to that word, the word educated. I just did a Google search because, come on, what do I know about education, right? I'm in academia. And it came up with these two wonderful answers. It's a process of receiving or giving systematic instruction. Wonderful. Yeah, that's what we do, right? But it's meant to be an enlightening experience. What is enlightenment? Well, Abraham Maslow created this. Most of us are familiar with that. Something that goes from meeting psychological needs or physiological needs towards helping us achieve self-actualization. If we have people who are educated in the true sense, then any challenge in the world can be solved. Maybe not tomorrow, but soon thereafter. So each of us, in a way, have a choice to make. We can either choose to be managers and executives who are simply driven by a narrow definition of success, career success as well as financial success, or we can choose to become true leaders who not only look at personal success, but also think about triple bottom line. Think about both people and planet in addition to profits. Or we can think about quadruple bottom line by adding peace into the 3P. Or we can think about the penta bottom line. Or we can think about the hexa bottom line. And I'm sure by the time I'm done, somebody would have thought of another P to add over there. And we'll be chasing the 7-axis bottom line. So collectively and individually, it's a choice. It's a choice that each of us can make. In a way, we stand at the edge. On one side is the familiar, a world that is complex, but is filled with complacency. On the other is this exciting space where true innovation, true collaboration, and true progress resides. We can choose to make a difference If you do, here are some of the programs that we have, like Dr. Luigi kindly went over, all the way from 2 leadership programs to MBAs to the 5 specialized degrees. They are designed to help you succeed in this increasingly connected, complex, and competitive world by helping you not only become capable of helping your organization succeed, but also help you become more conscious and more cognizant of the consequences of your decisions on the wider world in order to create a world that not only can look forward to a better future, but can also have the possibility of a future at all. Well, welcome to the world where what you love, what you're good at, and what you're paid for, and if I can change that, I'll add the word highly paid for, actually delivers what the world truly needs. It is a choice, and the choice is yours. Don't wait for change. Shape it. Thank you very much.